For the fourth episode of the Josh the Collins podcast, I talked with my old friend Earl Standerford. We talked about film photography, his life in Japan, and caught back up on some old stories from long ago when we both lived in Okinawa, Japan. So if you're interested in photography or Japan, or you know Earl or I, or you just want to listen to an interesting podcast, stick around to listen to it, and at the very end we'll talk about where you can find Earl and where you can find all of his work. Thanks for watching and have a good day. A lot of photographers that I follow, or like YouTube photographers that I've seen before, like Willem Verbeek and all these other people that do film pretty heavily, a lot of them end up in Tokyo to do street photos. It seems like that's like the hottest place to be for street photos outside of the US.
Well, yeah, I don't know. It's just when you're taking photos in Japan, it kind of feels natural. It's like being in New York, nobody really cares if you have a camera or not. They kind of assume that you're just a tourist.
That makes sense. I mean, like here in the Midwest, it's really weird for me because my favorite form of photography is street photography. Like I take portraits a lot and I love fashion type portraits and everything, but like street photos are where I first learned to take photos. It's my favorite type. But here it's a lot harder because if you approach somebody with a camera around here, they notice you really quick and they zoom in on your camera immediately. So you have to play that weird balance of like pretending to not take their picture, but also not pretending to not take their picture because then you look like a creep. So,
or you just gotta like be straight up and be like, "Hey, can I take your photo?" If not, cool, whatever.
Yeah, for sure. My favorite types are like the off the cuff, not like played out or not planned out photos. So it's so hard for me to get that without looking too creepy. My only rule I really have though is like I don't take pictures of kids in public. Beyond that, if you're in public, I'm probably going to take a picture of you.
I mean, you can't do that in the States. It'll be a lawsuit.
Yeah, for sure. And it's something about I'm not going to post a picture of a kid anyways, so that's like the weird part. But beyond that, if you're out in the street, if you look interesting, or if you're walking past a shadow, I might snap a photo of you. So
yeah. I mean, that's why Leicas is so popular because they're super silent shutters. So even if you take a photo of somebody, they're not going to hear it.
Yeah, I've always wanted to get a Leica, and for whatever reason, I've never brought myself to pay that amount for a 35 yet. But on the flip side, I've spent $2,000 on a digital camera, so why can't I throw out a couple hundred for a Leica or a Bessa or something like that?
Oh, exactly. Yeah, go ahead and sell it.
Yeah, it's never going to lose its value if it's still worth that much today, right?
And they still get repaired by Leica, so it's like you're not going to worry about getting it broken at all.
Yeah. So I guess I'll do a quick introduction of you for this video, right?
Yeah.
I've known you for a long time. I've known you since we were like 15,
elementary.
16, 14, 13, going around smoking cigarettes and causing mayhem. And you were always the guy with the camera even back then. I remember like seeing you with the camera often, and then also having all these pictures that are like really high quality from 35 millimeter film cameras you had even in high school. And I'm like, oh man, that's where all those good photos came from, because I don't know where, like I've just got these photos of us together and just, me, you, Eddie, Sean, Brandon, all these people just hanging out.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And
I still have them, I look at them sometimes.
Yeah. And you took photography and you didn't stop with it. You kept going and going and going. And now it seems like you've established a pretty solid career so far, and you're young. I mean, you got to be what? Like you probably just turned 30 or about to turn 30, right?
I'm 31 right now. I'll be 32
31.
32 in October, but same age range.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I heard you did a shoot with Fallout Boy. Is that true?
Yeah, did a shoot with Fallout Boy as soon as I got to Tokyo. That was pretty cool. We went inside it's called Tokyo Labo, and it's kind of like an art museum, and they had like these huge like kind of like workout balls, which are like 8 feet in diameter, so they're huge, and they had a bunch of balls in the room, and we took some artist photos in there.
What was it like? Cool. What was it like working with somebody that like? I mean, I'm not a huge Fallout Boy fan, but I'm not gonna lie, I listened to them when I was in high school.
Oh, dude, yeah, we all did.
Yeah.
But actually meeting them in person, it's like, oh, okay, these guys are pretty regular. Their vocalist is graying out, and he's all gray, and they weren't as as I expected them to be.
Yeah, just way more like down to earth.
Nice to meet them. Get to see how they really were.
Yeah, I imagine so. It seems kind of like every time I've run into people that I've looked up to for a long time when I was younger, you kind of
Mhm.
learn that everybody is pretty much the same. Everyone, unless they're like really douchey, everyone's pretty much the same.
Oh, I mean, like August Burns Red or Jaffer Cowboy that I played with in Okinawa, they're pretty much the same. You know, they're nice guys. They even invited me to. I mean, August Burns Red is like super Christian.
Yeah, didn't they invite you guys all to church afterwards?
Well, the drummer, he invited me to Pennsylvania to stay in his house, but he's like, you got to sleep in separate beds with your girlfriend. And
Yeah,
I
I
was like,
understand that.
okay, yeah, okay,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I mean, rules are rules.
Yeah, my parents had the same rule for me. My wife and I have been together. We've been married for 2 years, but we've been together for like 6 or 7 years. And
Yeah,
even though we lived together, like if we ever stayed with my parents, it was always like, no, you guys have to do separate rooms. Until we got married. Now it's not a problem, but
yeah, yeah.
yeah, no, I understand that. So talking about music, give me 1 second. Let me double check this really quick. I got a notification. Okay, yeah, we are still recording. Speaking about music, so you were in a band called Shores for a long time, and you guys travel. You were Okinawa-based band, traveled to Taiwan, traveled around Japan on a couple tours,
Hmm.
making music, which is kind of interesting because Shores is like a mashup of Shisaw Massacre and Nani Kore and some other musicians in the area. So when you think about like the roots of where it all started from when we were in high school, and we were just playing music for fun and never really, took it that
Hmm.
far. Um, has that affected like you as a person later on in life, like having experiences like that at a young age, like where you were able to see a lot of the world and create art and get paid for, I mean, not millions of dollars, but actually see something come back out of something that you created?
Yeah, it kind of made me, I guess, more because I would take lead in like making a lot of the songs. I People in the band had ideas, but I was kind of in charge of like making it happen. So it kind of gave me, uh, an idea of how to create things and how to put it out there in public. So early on, I kind of got an idea how to present myself as a creative. So it was really nice to be able to be part of that band. And even after Shores, like I was in a band called Autumn Creatures in Colorado as soon as I moved there in 2015. And that was a really successful project too. And we had a lot of traction with that. And the band's still going on, even though I'm in Japan right now. But yeah, being in a band early on, and I would say what 17, 18, is a really good thing for me being a photographer right now.
Yeah, you kind of get to learn like the business side of art too, because I feel like
Exactly. Yeah.
there's a lot of artists out there that don't get recognized because they don't understand the business and marketing part of
Mhm.
like you have to show people your work and show them why you should buy it, or at
Yeah,
least
and being in a
support it.
band, you're doing marketing. You're reaching out to people to book tours. Making merch and handling money and all that. I mean, it wasn't a lot of money, but at sometimes we'd make like 5 grand off a show, which is really good for a band. Usually bands just make money off the bar money after a night. They make a percentage at the bar, but sometimes we'd make good money.
Yeah, and learning how to manage that at an early age or like early on in like a career of like self-owned business is definitely a key point in like whether you succeed or not later on.
Yeah, I mean, as a photographer right now, I'm not. Photographers don't make too much money in in the real world
Yeah, it
unless you're
sucks.
like successful.
True, unless you're
But
like one of the Maxim photographers right now.
yeah, yeah. Even though you're like working every day as a photographer, I wouldn't say you're making too much because you're either paying a lot of tax, being a self business, or you're spending a lot for gear and upkeep and all that. So that's why I work a part time job at the camera store because there's ups and downs, especially with Corona.
Oh,
So a lot of
absolutely.
people lost work, and it was good that I had that part time job because I'm still able to work on the side,
Yeah,
and I'm happy they didn't fire me and they kept me.
that's awesome, man. I mean, this is I mean, I'm a photographer as well, not
Mm.
as definitely not as established as you are. I mean, I started taking photos about the same time. In high
Yeah.
school, I got my first
Hmm.
like DSLR like camera, but I never really took the initiative to take it really seriously until maybe like
Yeah.
4 or 5 years ago. And you're actually the reason why I got into film photography, because once you told me you were shooting film, I started looking at
Oh,
videos of people using film, and I started following other
yeah.
people that shoot film, and I was like, oh, I need to get into this too, for sure. Which taught me
Yeah.
exponentially more about photography shooting on film than I'd ever learned on digital.
Hmm.
But what I was saying was this whole coronavirus thing, especially with photography, I noticed like how photography was my main source of income for a while. And you're right,
Hmm.
you don't really make that much money to begin with because my gear
No,
costs
it's
X amount, and then I got to buy this new lens for this new project, and then once you really put it out hourly rate, you're not really making that much, even if it's a $500 shoot. I could
yeah.
be.
The average photographer is probably going to make a lot more money working a regular job.
Mhm.
It's being a photographer. It's fun. That's why people do it, and a lot of people don't really care about how much they make unless they're enjoying what they do. So I respect them, but I got to live.
Yeah, man.
And I don't know if I can grind it. Maybe I enjoy more doing work that I like, so it's kind of hard to hire me for gigs because I'm pretty stubborn as far as that. I won't just take fashion photos for clothes. I mean, there's a type of photography that is for strictly for magazines, and you're there on set just firing the shutter like 1,000 times. And I'm not into that because it's just for selling a product. I like working slow, and I like making each photo as best as it can be, and not really just for advertisement wise. I'm not really into that. I like making what I like, so it makes me difficult to market.
Man, I understand what you're saying though, because like my
Yeah.
favorite form of photography is street photography. No one makes money
Yeah,
on street
that
photography.
doesn't sell unless
No.
you're no,
Yeah. I
maybe
mean,
back in the day.
yeah, back in the day, and even then, like there's some amazing street photographers that didn't even get noticed until after they died. Like there's so
Yeah,
many people out there. What's her name? Vivian. I think her name's Vivian.
Meyer.
Yeah. Oh, so you know exactly what I'm
Yeah,
talking about. Yeah. Probably
yeah,
one of the most
she
famous postpartum photographers that ever
yeah,
existed.
yeah. It's kind of unfortunate that I mean she didn't want her work revealed, but some guy found her work and put it out there, and the guy's probably making a shitload of money right now.
That's
But
true. That's true.
we wouldn't have known about her work if it wasn't for him, so I can't really say much.
Yeah, I guess that's a good point. But I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I don't really want to take, but I do take sometimes when I need the money. I mean, if
Mm.
the biggest thing for me is weddings, I really don't like shooting
Oh,
weddings unless the person is aware that if I shoot this wedding, I'm going to shoot it like it's street photography, which means
hmm
I'm going to take the photos that I want to take of what I see going
hmm
on. So you're going to get like basically B-roll photography of what's happening at your wedding. I really don't like posing people. I really don't like making everybody get together and smile and double check all that. So I've done a couple weddings like that where people were like, "Yeah, we hired you because we like your style." But those are few and far between, and they don't really pay that much for the amount of work that goes into it. And because it's
yeah,
somebody's special day, I feel so much more
that's
pressure.
nerve wracking.
Yeah, I had an SD card completely get corrupted one time. So I was shooting with two cameras and a film camera,
Hmm
and I had HP 5400. I was pushing it out to
hmm
1600 and shooting in a basement
hmm
for guys getting ready, right? So I'm already
hmm
doing something that I'm used to doing, but anytime you push film, especially if it's for something special, there's always that X factor, like something might
Yep.
go wrong with this. And I brought a digital camera,
Always
and
have a plan B.
yeah, so my plan B was my digital camera I had brought, but then that
Mm.
card got corrupted. So the only fallback I had was to make sure that these like film photos that I was pushing and a camera that I wasn't really familiar with were perfect. Luckily, they came out fine. But
Yeah.
man, talk about a heart attack. Seeing like an SD card fail, it's just now I have to make sure my developing is perfect, and that's
Or
terrifying.
you, at the end of the day, you notice all the photos are out of focus.
Yeah, that's
Never had that, luckily.
oh
I've done
gosh.
my fair share of weddings, but I enjoy doing weddings much so in the States more than Japan.
Is
It's
that
more
because of
spontaneous.
all the changes of wardrobe and how it's like very planned out with Japanese weddings?
No, Japanese weddings, they tend to do it in the church, and I'm like, it's like pretty standard, a little too I don't know, a little too holy for me. I don't know. It's like it's pretty bland. But when you go to the States, it's like, okay, we're gonna do it out on the field, pretty casual, everybody's having fun, not too serious at all. And then, after the wedding ceremony, then, everybody's laid back and drinking, talking, and it's really easy to take photos. Nobody's all too serious. And as long as you're doing your job correctly, everybody's cool with it.
That's true. And I think, you can get some really good photos from a wedding, especially if you shoot it like it's a street photo. So if they're okay with that side of it. I've got a photo that I've got to find somewhere that I took, not on a DSLR, just like on a phone, but it was of my wife's cousin's wedding, where the bride was doing a keg stand in her dress, which is like the epitome of American style, like, more country like weddings.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like great content. But again, that's something that I find extremely artistically, like, it makes me feel good when I see that, But I know that photos like that aren't going to make me any money at all. So that's the kind of like trade-off.
But it makes people happy. They're going to see it like, 10 years later, and they're going to be like, oh man, that was great, because it's a memory. It's not like a staged posed photo, where it can do anywhere.
Absolutely.
You don't get that moment if you're just doing regular photography. You have to be getting those random moments.
Absolutely. So something I want to ask you about your photography. Like, I don't want to make this podcast like an interview, but I mean, I don't think it would be, because I've known you for a long time. Even if we don't talk a lot, like, I don't know. I mean, it's just like talking with an old friend, But I do have some questions I want to ask you.
Yeah, go ahead.
So with your photography style, right? I feel like you've got a very, very like noticeable style. When I pull up my Instagram and I see a picture that you've posted, like immediately I'm like, that's Earl's photo. Before I even see your name, I know it's one of your photos. Where do you get like that kind of inspiration to take photos like the way you do? A lot of your stuff, I've noticed, like, you do something similar to what I do, which is where you don't shoot women from really high angles all the time. Oftentimes you're having them look down at a camera from a lower angle and like making them look a lot larger, which is something that like traditional photographers don't do, which I hate that rule anyways. But what kind of stuff like causes you to shoot the way you do?
I mean, I think my past style, it's from, so I got kind of a little bit more serious in 2015, and I moved to back to Japan in 2019. So those 4 years I had a certain style, and then coming back to Japan, it kind of changed a little bit, because the people that I know and what I'm used to doing, it kind of got disrupted. So it's changed a little bit, but my initial style was more storytelling, and I did a lot of studying of cinema back in the day. So I would try to place my subjects in a area of the frame that would kind of create more of a story, including the background that would kind of give this overall feel that there's more of a story to tell, not just a person posing for the photo. And to get that, I would use a wider lens to get everything in that frame. So typically I use a 28 millimeter. So that's why it kind of has that. When you're using a 28 millimeter, you have to get close, or the subject's gonna look really tiny. So I use a wide lens, and I kind of get up close, and I'm gonna get down typically, because shooting upwards, you're only gonna get the ground in the background. So if you're shooting upwards, then you can get everything around you, not so much from the top. So I usually shoot eye level or from below. Depends what the background is.
Yeah, I kind of see that now that you mentioned that you studied a lot of like cinema, because a lot of my friends that studied film before they started taking photos, especially when they took film photos, I can really see almost like it looks like a screenshot from a movie scene in a lot of photos. And I think especially your photos that you did, was it the Naha rooftop one that you have on your website, where it's a lot of red lights?
Yeah.
Yeah, that one, it reminds me of like some sort of like Kill Bill scene or something like that.
Yeah, I definitely pay attention. I think more so, like, compared to anything, I pay attention to the lighting. Lighting is number one for all the photos I take.
You do call yourself a lighting wizard for a reason, right?
Yeah. I mean, lighting, without proper lighting, you can't set a mood. So, if it was just a white background and balanced lighting all the time, it would be boring. So, I try to get the most interesting lighting to make each photo stand out.
Yeah, that makes sense. I didn't know a whole lot about lighting for a long time, and majority of what I
Hmm.
learned about lighting was just shooting and seeing what I thought looked good and what I thought looked
Hmm.
really bad.
Yeah.
And for the longest time, I did those really corny, like really low light, like single light photos
Hmm.
where it looks.
Those can be cool sometimes.
They can be
It
cool, but a
depends.
lot of it, I
Yeah.
think it's like a facade. You like put it out there, and it makes it
Yeah.
look like the photo's really cool, so you know what you're
Yeah.
doing. And in reality, I'm just
Mm.
kind of like, I don't know. I guess like this.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So you said
And that's how you get better.
so
Yeah.
you said you shoot on 28 millimeter for a lot of photos. For is that
Yeah.
portraits only, or do street photos on 28 as well?
Oh, I mean, yeah, 28, 24. Like I said, my style's changed up since I moved back to Japan. I'm doing a lot more street photos. Actually, like 80% street photos, 20% like portraits and stuff. I don't know a lot of people compared to when I used to live here, so I find myself doing a lot more street photos and kind of exploring Tokyo because when I was in Tokyo on tour in my band, we'd stop in a few places, but we didn't really have the chance to look around too much. So I'm, kind of exploring new areas and kind of documenting those certain cities while I'm here because I have no idea how long I'm going to be in Tokyo. I might move back to the States sometime, so gotta get it while I can.
Absolutely. Have you ever thought
Yeah.
about like trying out a different type of street photography, like going for a really Bruce Gilden approach to photography in Tokyo?
Not so much with Flash. I do use Flash sometimes, but I I do get up close and personal a lot. I kind of pretend I'm not pointing the camera at them, but since I have such a wide lens on the camera, they're going to be in the photo.
Yeah, that's something
So,
that I think that people
yeah.
don't take advantage of enough when they do street photos. I see a lot of people that just go out with a 50 millimeter and that's it.
Mhm.
But like I've even shot street, and this is going to sound ridiculous. This setup, I've got this Canon. Oh, what is it? It's a Canon Rebel G something.
Okay.
So
Mhm.
it's a 35 millimeter, but it's one that takes like the Canon like red dot. What?
Yeah, the automatic
Yeah, I can't think of the lens type.
EF
Yeah,
lens.
the EF lenses. So I've got a 16 to
Yeah.
35 Tamron lens. So I'm shooting at
Hmm.
16 millimeter for a lot of
Yeah,
this
that's pretty
stuff.
bad.
And it's
Yeah.
the point that like I can get you in frame if you're 10 feet to my right.
Hmm.
And it's kind of cool to get shots like that. I mean, I don't always shoot 16, but what kind of
Hmm.
camera are you shooting with when you're shooting? Are you using a point and shoot? Are you using a Leica? What are you using for street photos?
Oh man, I since working at this camera store, I've obtained a mother load of cameras. But typically, I would use a Nikon F3, and that's the camera I've been using since seventh grade. Same camera.
Have you got it
So
serviced a lot, or has it been pretty? Has it held up
nope,
pretty well?
nope. It's held up.
I'm glad to hear that because I picked up a Nikon F2 last year and I love it. It's actually outlasted my
Yeah.
Canon AE1, which
Mhm.
kind of like died on me.
Yeah, the mechanical cameras are the way to go. If you take it to like below, negative 10 or 20 weather, it's gonna die out on you. So having a mechanical camera definitely helps out, with weird weather.
Yeah, and I also got it because you take off that viewfinder and you've got the waist level
Mhm.
finder, and just kind of trying to line up a photo like that without getting the actual like zoom like
Yeah.
attachment is
Mhm.
kind of cool because you kind of get a different aspect. And you can also kind of get away with taking people's photos when you're looking down at your waist because it doesn't look like you're taking a
Exactly.
photo. I like
Yeah, it
that a
looks
lot.
cool that way because you can kind of like I don't know, you can see it. I mean, you can see it through the viewfinder, but it's like kind of a different perspective, and it looks cool looking from the waist.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, most of my street photos, like I'm zone shooting majority of the time anyway. So
Yeah.
I'm not, or zone focusing. So I'm not really worried about focus for the waist level stuff like that. But have you ever tried, like, one of my favorite ways to take street photos right now too is with a point and shoot Canon G7X. Just because it's so small. And I think my biggest problem with like being out and about is that if I've got a camera on me, I've also got my wife and like maybe my dogs with me as well. So I've got so much stuff around me at all times. Having one of these point and shoots, it's so easy to just pull out and snap a photo really quick.
Oh yeah, I have a cheap like a Olympus
like one of the pens or something.
Stylus or no, it's a Mew in Japan. It's called a Stylus in the States. But I got it at Goodwill for like $5, and
Goodwill is the best for old 35. I found like 4 cameras there for like $5 or less.
Yeah, depending on where you live, if you live in like a drier state, most likely the lens is going to be clean. But if you live out in New York or the East, somewhere on the East Coast, lens tend to be a little foggy. Could be moldy, but if you're in the Midwest or California, it's going to be pretty clear.
Yeah, and I'm in Ohio right now, which I've kind of debated on whether or not I'll call it the Midwest because it's right next to Pennsylvania, which a lot of people call East Coast. So I'm kind of like, it's so close to being Midwest. And then, I mean, we're 8 hours from the ocean, and we're way farther from like Iowa than we are from the ocean, But it does get pretty humid here.
And I've noticed the Midwest.
Yeah, I mean, culturally, definitely the Midwest. Yeah. Location-wise, I feel like it's like in the middle. it's like middle, east, west, I guess.
Yeah. So it does get humid there.
Yeah, it gets pretty humid. I mean, not Okinawa humid, but it's way more humid here than other places I've been as far as like Midwest wise. I just actually picked up, hold on, let me grab it really quick. I can't remember what brand this is, but I picked this up from a Goodwill near me. Whoops, I'm moving everything around. I'm doing exactly what you're not supposed to do in a podcast. I'm standing up and moving around. Okay, I got this, which is a Minolta Freedom Vista. Have you seen one of these before?
Yeah. Is that autofocus?
It is. It's also a panorama, so it shoots panoramic. But I mean, it's just cropped in, is all it is.
Yeah.
I didn't know that until after I shot with it. So I shot an entire roll, and when the roll came out, I saw these like cropped in like panoramic shots, and like my mind was blown. I was like, "What? I found this for $2 at a Goodwill."
Yeah, those aren't bad,
Yeah.
If you're just going around taking photos, it doesn't have to be perfect. It's just your like daily record.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there stores like Goodwill where you can find cameras and like and stuff camera related besides camera stores in Tokyo?
Yeah, there are a lot of pawn shops and stuff like that, but they're kind of figuring out that there's this want for film cameras recently, so they're jacking up the prices.
I've seen that a lot, especially with
the place to go is like eBay or Yahoo Auction, which they have in Japan.
That makes sense. I've seen the what is it, Contax T2 or something like that. Like whatever one of the Jenner kids started posted a picture.
It was
of.
a T3
or T3.
Yeah, the prices went up.
Yeah,
around 2,000.
Yeah, I saw somebody selling one for like $2,300, and like, wow, that's
it's overpriced. It's like the camera you have, that Minolta, is just as fine. You're not even supposed to take point and shoot photography so seriously, anyways. At least I don't.
I just use it as like convenience. I think maybe one reason why it's becoming more popular, I've seen a lot more people with point and shoot cameras. I think it's because it gives you the ability to take a photo without really knowing what you're doing. They don't have to worry about aperture. Yeah. They don't have to worry about the ISO of the film they're using because they can't really push or pull it if it's automatically red, and they don't have to focus anything. So they just point and go. So maybe it's that kind of like, for a lot of people, I wonder if it's just the convenience of not having to learn how to use a camera.
Just they want to shoot film, or they don't want to worry about not knowing any of the settings.
Exactly.
So I mean, that's a good introduction to film photography, just getting a point and shoot.
Yeah, and it kind of, I think that film photography in general, I feel like there's a lot of people that have bad feelings about it, like I've heard a lot of people say like, oh, it's for pretentious hipsters, which Maybe it is. I'm not
How is
sure.
it for pretentious hipsters if that's the first medium before digital photography?
I don't know. I have no idea. I think maybe it's just
I
like
mean,
the kids that push it out too far on Instagram, but I don't really care
yeah.
about like what people think
I
of it.
mean, if you have a man bun and you're out shooting photography with your, sunglasses on, and I don't know. There's a lot of people that take it as a fad, or
Yeah, for
people
sure.
that just do it because they don't want to use their iPhone. I mean, personally, I don't look at my iPhone photos, so taking film photos forces me to look at it because I have to scan it myself. So
Yeah. And my iPhone I use just to like take snapshots. I feel like
mhm.
it's even point and shoot. Excuse me, even point and shoot cameras. A lot of the times to me it's just snapshots, stuff that are like the obvious picture. A guy bending
Mhm.
over, and as he bends over, there's like a stream of water coming out from behind him, so it looks like he's peeing. Like I'm
Yeah.
definitely going to take that picture.
Oh
But
yeah.
that to me is like a snapshot. I feel like I reserve a lot of my 35 millimeter stuff, like on manual film cameras with, you
Hmm.
know, I feel like I reserve a lot of that for like photos I find to be more meaningful, I guess.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I don't know. Film is something to me that's just fantastic for learning how light works, learning how photography works, and just way beyond that fact that you got a really nice Sony A7R2 with a nice automatic lens, you know?
Yeah. I mean, something having a camera that good, a mirrorless, it definitely has its spot in photography for doing like work. If you need to put something in a magazine and you have a shitty scan of a 35 millimeter photo, it's not going to work. If they need something like what, like a if they need a billboard size photo, it's going to be hard to get
Yeah,
it for
film's not going to
35.
do that at all.
You got to shoot medium format for that, or large format. But it does have its place in photography. I definitely use digital when if they need a fast turnaround time, and I'm slow editing, so I'll just shoot digital.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the same way. I actually, the reason I said Sony A7R2 is because that's my favorite camera I've used that's digital, just
Oh,
because
it's great.
I
Yeah.
think it's got like 50 megapixels almost, and like,
And you can adapt like older film lenses to it and give it that special look.
yeah,
I don't personally like Sony lenses because they're a little bit too sharp, so I'll use a film lens to give it a soft, nice look.
hmm
And film lenses have a better bokeh, anyways.
yeah, I agree. It's really like I think the bokeh from film lens is kind of, it's really like a blurred background where it's distorted enough
Hmm.
to where it's got perfect separation. Where I think film is just like what's in the background. It's just it's kind of out of focus.
Right.
Yeah. This is kind of cool to talk to you about film like this because I could, or cameras in general, photography in general. I could definitely not keep up conversations like this a couple years ago.
Oh man, I talk about film cameras every day. I'm like a film wizard now, working at that store.
Something I'm curious about is something I see quite a few people talking about is when you're talking about marketing your photography or like showing
Mhm.
your, whether it's photography, videography, any sort of art business, right? It seems like a lot of people assume that the bigger audience you have on Instagram, the more you're going to get jobs, which
That's not.
I have
I
found to be
mean,
not true because I got way more jobs when I had 50 followers than I did when I got 800 followers. Where do you actually find the majority of your clients coming through? Is it word of mouth? Is it you marketing yourself directly to them, or how are you doing that? If I'm asking too many
well,
questions, by the way, just stop me if I'm getting too deep into
no, no,
anything.
no, you're good. The States and Japan is completely different. In the States, people are a little bit more approachable. You can just walk up to somebody or just send them a casual email saying, I'm so and so, and here's my portfolio. If you're interested, hire me. But in Japan, it's a little bit different. You need business cards. You have to actually have a few drinks with the person to, let them know what kind of person you are. There's this kind of barrier between you and the other person where you have to break before you can actually, get a job.
Mm.
So in that sense, you need more connections. It's not as easily attainable
And so,
compared to the States.
if somebody wanted to become a photographer in Japan, you like, そして日本語を話さないといけないですね.
Yeah,
Yeah,
speak Japanese.
yeah, for sure.
And that's one of the main reasons I came back, because I was kind of losing my Japanese, so I came back to kind of perfect that.
So, what's it like?
And
what's it like being half Japanese and having like, I mean, I felt like I had an identity crisis and I'm not even Japanese at all, you know? Like I just
Yeah.
lived in Japan and learned the language and worked for Japanese companies for so long that I would find myself, even now, I dream in Japanese often, I think in Japanese often, and I feel
Yeah.
like I'm not Japanese, and I also feel like I don't fit in here. What's it like for you, who actually has the cultural background of being half? Like where when you're in
Well,
Japan, you stick out. When you're in America, you might feel like you stick out too.
well, it's kind of like a trifecta because I'm not even Japanese. I'm from Okinawa, so like,
I apologize for calling you Japanese. I should have said Okinawan.
no, it's all good. I was, and I'll go into this later, but it's kind of they view Okinawa as they don't take Okinawan so seriously because there's not a lot happening in Okinawa. So when they hear that you're Okinawan, they're like, oh, like tropical island, laid back, super chill, hang ten.
Yeah,
So, well, immediately based off of my uh, outer exterior, they kind of assume that I'm American or from a Western country, so they don't assume that I speak Japanese. When I do speak Japanese, they're like, "Oh, okay, this guy speaks Japanese," but it goes beyond that fact, and it's like, okay, this guy is American, so it's kind of more a barrier compared to regular people that live here. But in the creative world, I would say that as long as you can have a good, outstanding relationship with whoever you're trying to work for, it doesn't really matter. But the immediate assumption is that you're American, so we're going to stick with our own people.
and that's a really good point. That what you just said. You're American, so we're going to stick with our own people. Um, I worked for a Japanese company, which I will not name because I'm just not going to do that. I love the people that I worked with. I just was not a fan of the business itself. And, I saw a major difference with the way that management treated Japanese that worked there and Americans that worked there. And I noticed an even bigger difference when 6 months before I left, a Japanese born Japanese speaker came and they were promoted much more quickly and were given access to much more information than the Americans were, even though they had a job that was like lower on the totem pole. I feel like that's something that.
Yeah, it has to do with older generation. They're kind of like, will stick with their own kind of mentality.
Yeah, and
I mean, it's the same for any country though. Like if you're an American, you go to Russia, and you find other Americans there, you're immediately going to group up with those Americans.
Yeah, you stick with what you know.
You're Japanese and you're in the States, you're gonna be more friendly with your own. That's only natural, but I see it more in the older generation that they're kind of more subject to be attracted to their own people. But I would say the younger generation, they're more international, so that kind of mentality is going away slowly.
Yeah, and the younger generation, like our generation in Japan, is way more liberal and way less conservative. I mean, when you look at people that have tattoos, right? Majority of my friends in Okinawa that are Japanese, most of them have at least one or two, and that's very taboo if you're any older than like 30 or 40.
Yeah, they'll ask you why you got tattoos. Like, what's the meaning behind it? It's like, for people that live in the States, it's kind of cultural.
Yeah, I mean, and for me, it was weird when I started working for this Japanese company because, I'm heavily tattooed right now. I've got tattoos on my hands, all of my arms, everywhere, right? And working for this Japanese company, the owner was 97 years old. He was so old that he fought against the United States in World War II. No joke.
Jesus.
He's that old. So anytime we took company photos, I had to have my arms behind my back and hide it. And like I had plugs at the time, so it was like I stood out like a sore thumb. But one thing I've always done, and I've always made it a point to do, is even when I'm around Japanese people, I will be respectful, but I don't change the way I act or speak when I'm speaking Japanese, because I want them to know like I am American still. So I'm not gonna like I'll be respectful, but I'm not gonna talk the same way. So like I talk with a lot of Okinawan slang still, and it makes people laugh every single time I start talking. Like when I roll my R's or I say na a lot instead of ne, or I
Yeah.
say any Japanese word, they just crack up. And I guess the best way I could explain that to somebody who doesn't speak Japanese is it's almost like seeing a Japanese person in China with an accent like they're from Louisiana.
Oh yeah. I mean, because Okinawans are like kind of like country bumpkins compared to like Tokyo people. So yeah, they kind of they'll definitely laugh. And yeah, when I speak Japanese, it's definitely noticeable that I'm not from the central region because I've got a little twang in my voice.
Yeah, you got some Hogan still when you're talking?
A little, not so much, but the dialect is a little bit different.
Yeah, and for me, I I guess I was naive thinking like that learning Japanese in Okinawa around a bunch of Okinawan kids that I was going to get like pure Japanese. So much
I had to relearn that.
Yeah, so much of what I learned I didn't realize was Hogan, and I didn't realize it was Uchinanshu. It was not Japanese. So when I would speak to the people from Osaka, they would stare at me like, I don't know what you're saying right now, and it was very confusing.
Yeah, that's not standard. It's not the universal language, so people won't know what the hell you're saying.
So now that you're back in Japan, what's something that you really missed about Japan that you didn't really think about until you got back until you started living in Tokyo again?
Well, my main reason to come back was to finish a Okinawa project that I started in 2008.
Okay.
And it probably will never be finished until I'm like 40 or so. But I came back to work on the Okinawa project, but I found myself in Tokyo just for work. Obviously there's not going to be a lot of work on an island, so I moved to the big city to get some work, and yeah, it's been working out for me. A lot more connections, and I've been to Okinawa maybe like 2 times since I've been back. So I guess it's kind of a fair amount, but I'd like to go back to Okinawa to work on the project a little bit more.
It would be really cool to live.
Go ahead.
I was going to say it would be really cool to live in Okinawa and be able to shoot in Okinawa every day. But you're right, the jobs are really
if I had
hard to
a
find.
steady income, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what are you going to do? You can work on base, but they're like minimum wage unless you have a degree and you're into government contracting. So
yeah, I'll be stuck to like sofa status and all that. The dream, I do have a book out, but the dream would be to make enough to survive and take photos every day. As long as I could probably live off of 1,500 easily. But being in Tokyo, it's impossible to live off that kind of money.
Oh yeah, that probably doesn't even cover rent for 1 month. Like, there's no way.
I mean, surprisingly, you can get by with maybe 700. I pay around 800 a month.
Really? That's
as long as you live outside the 23 wards, which is the little circle around Tokyo.
Yeah.
As long as you live out there, you can get by with 500, 600 easily.
So you're telling me I couldn't live in Shinjuku with like $500 rent?
No, in Shinjuku you used to be spending like $2,000 for a little 1-room apartment, but
I'm just joking.
Maybe 20 minutes outside Tokyo, you'd spend 500, 600.
That's not bad.
Yeah, and then you live in a different prefecture like Saitama or Chiba, then you can get a house for 800.
Wow, that's not bad at all. I have to keep that in mind.
Yeah.
I actually was offered a job in Shinjuku last year, and I ended up not taking it for a couple reasons. But I had looked into moving out to Tokyo for a while and was kind of like researching, like, man, do I really want to do that? And like, if I do that, do I want to live in the city? Do I want to live on the outside?
Yeah,
it's a lot of.
I mean,
especially now, there's more. Yeah, you can work in the city and live outside the city. But now I've got a whole lot more on my plate, because if I was 20 years old, I'd be like, absolutely, and just immediately move out. But now, I'll be 30 soon. I've got a child on the way. We're due in April for a kid. I'm married. I've got a dog. I've got a cat. I've had them for years.
April's coming up.
Yeah, and I can't just flippantly say, I'm going to move, across the world again. I mean, to me, it's going back home. But like, my wife's from Ohio. She's never been outside the U.S. So
I mean, it's worth a trip, but like having a kid in Japan, that's a lot of paperwork. You might as well wait until the kid's born and turn 5 years old, and
oh,
then
absolutely.
move out here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that eventually we might want to like, maybe move to Japan temporarily. I mean, even if it's
Mm.
just like a 6 month thing, just to like experience something different. I know my wife really wants to leave the country and see something different, and Japan is where she's
Yeah.
most comfortable with because she loves the Japanese culture. She loves Japanese food.
Mhm.
She's always watching Japanese stuff with me, and that's something that I'm familiar with. So it's a country we can go to that speaks a different language where I'm not going to get lost because I don't know what anybody's saying. I'll probably get lost because I
Yeah.
don't understand the train system in Japan still, especially in
Oh,
Tokyo.
Google Maps your friend when you live out here.
That's what Jordan said. Jordan said that Google Maps will take you from your front door immediately to where you want to go and tell you like
It'll tell
everything.
you what train to get on, what time, how much the fare is. I still use it because I'm fairly unfamiliar with a lot of routes out here, so I'll use Google Map for everything.
Yeah, I remember back in 2009, maybe it's 2009, 2008. I came back to visit the U.S. and I had a layover in Tokyo for quite a long time, and I
Mhm.
decided I'm just going to go travel around. Like I've never
Yeah,
really been to Tokyo before, and I'm entirely by myself. I could figure this out. And within like an hour, I was completely lost. Had no idea how to get back at all. Almost missed my flight. So majority of my time spent in Tokyo was trying to figure out where I was.
hmm
I didn't get to
yeah,
experience much.
yeah. It depends where you're at in Tokyo, but they have so much going on, so many stores. So I mean, a lot of the stores are the same store, it's different chains. So you'll think you're in a certain area, but you're like an hour out.
So, what's it like to go to these gigantic high-rise buildings that have like a floor for each store, a floor for each business?
I was talking about this about last week, and it's like I don't know how like people are able to see each store. It drives me nuts. Like trying to like because I want to see like what each store has to offer, but it's impossible. Like I'd have to be out jobless, just out venturing, like searching every store to see what they have. But you're never in a lifetime going to be able to like check out each store. There's so many. So
Yeah,
you just have to decide like what suits your needs and just go to those stores.
that makes sense. I mean, I guess
But I just go to the convenience store and then it's the end of my day. I don't really need anything.
man,
I go pick up film, go to convenience store, go home.
konbinis are like the one thing about Japan that I don't think I'll ever be able to fully let go of. Like I can't
Oh,
get
they're
over just not having a real convenience store here because American gas stations are not convenience stores at all.
no. Like you go to 7-Eleven, you can pick up one of those tornadoes and have the shits for the rest of the day, and you're good. Get a
Yeah,
Slurpee, cool. The one thing I miss about 7-Elevens is they don't have Slurpees here, but the food you can you can definitely live off of convenience store food in Japan. They're premium.
yeah. I tell people here all the time, convenience store food, like gas station convenience store food in Japan, is still healthy. Like Japan's version of like unhealthy gas station food is like onigiri or fried chicken or like the meronpan or something because they're like, oh yeah, it's fatty because it's got carbs in it. So we're talking like melon flavored bread is considered not healthy in Japan, whereas in America we've got something called fun dip, which is a dipstick of
Oh
sugar that you
man,
lick and you put into more sugar and you eat the sugar off
yeah,
the
yeah,
sugar stick and then you eat the sugar stick. And we give that to children at baseball games.
yeah. Your teeth will rot out. But like Japanese food doesn't have so many additives, so I mean they'll go bad in a couple days. Stuff at the gas station. You can have you can have for like a month and it would be still good.
Yeah. I mean, there's a reason that I stayed skinny in Okinawa besides the fact that like, I really didn't make any money when I lived on my own.
Mm.
But I lived off of family
Oh, we,
welfare.
we 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 were homeless living in
Yeah.
Gary's office.
Oh wait, you stayed there too sometimes too, didn't you?
I was there.
Man, I forgot about that because it was so that would have been me, you, Hiromu, Aki, Toru was there often. So was
Oda
Christoph
was there
Kaburian.
sometimes.
Yeah,
Uh, uh fucking shoot, I'm Justin Rollins.
Oh yeah, I forgot Justin Rollins. Yeah, Justin Rollins too.
Rest in peace, Fashad.
Yeah, Fashad, man. So now for people who don't know, we're just reminiscing about awesome people.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a group photo of the Steve, Scuba Steve.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a bunch of photos from that era. When we were drawing on the walls, and I think Toru was drawing on the walls, and
yeah, he did the clown thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I did one of a weird like creature head thing with like wires coming out of it. I don't know, it was very stupid. I've got a lot of photos of that of then too. And I lived there towards the end of it. I lived there for a long time though. I lived there from the time my parents moved back to the US until I came back to the US. The entire time I lived there. And it was so bad because I remember during the summer a typhoon came through, but I didn't know a typhoon was coming through. So I got stuck and I was the only one left at the office. Yeah, because we called it the office, Jimsho.
Yeah.
So I was
the office, one in the office too.
Yeah, nobody was left at the office but me, and it's like during a typhoon, and like the power's out, and somebody had there were rats in there or mice, and someone shot one with a BB gun, and it ran away and died in the wall. So then it smelled like a dead rat, and there's a typhoon outside, and then the door broke, so then I couldn't even get out through the door, so we had to crawl through the window to get in and out of that place. I tell people all the time, like, that was such a shithole. Like, we didn't have a shower. We had a hose. We didn't have a toilet, but we had a hose. Yeah.
It was cold in the winter.
Yes, it was. Taking a shower out of a hose at like 50 degrees. Oh, my God. That was terrible.
Yeah. I would basically go to the beach and use their showers and then come back.
I remember going to Family Mart in just boxers and like sandals. And going at Family Mart like 2 o'clock in the morning and just like waving at the cashiers. You know, they're like, oh,
I mean, it's just right across the street.
Yeah. And just like, hey, I gotta take a dump, so I'm here at the convenience store because we don't have a toilet. It's so or trying to sleep on the weird little like couch things they had there because you couldn't lay on it, so you had to have your feet up in the air or you had to curl in a ball. Yeah. Man, I would never do that again. But I'm glad I did it when I was young.
Yeah. That was a good time. Just sleeping on sleeping bags on. It was like we had yellow plywood on top of tatami, with sleeping bags on top of that, and a little box TV that would play N64 or PlayStation, I forget.
Yeah, they had an Xbox for a while, so every time I hear Nirvana's MTV Unplugged album, I always immediately think of The Office because we had like 3 DVDs. It was Jackass, DVD full of Blink-182 music videos, and then Nirvana MTV Unplugged. And like, that's all it was playing all the time. It was either Jackass, Nirvana, or Blink-182.
It's a nightmare.
Yeah. I mean, I've got an entire playlist on Spotify with all those songs that I just have labeled as throwback. So every time I hear that song, it reminds me of UFO Soba, Tuna Mayo, Onigiri, and then like some
spicy chicken.
Yeah, spicy chicken, sanpincha, apple tea, milk tea.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Good times.
Yeah, man. I mean, good times and bad times. I remember that after a while of being there, especially because people thought it was a cool place to come, and a lot of people didn't respect it. A lot of people didn't realize that, like, I did not have another place to go. My parents lived in America. So when they would come through and they would trash it, and I would get home from work, and I had to walk from there to the BX on base every day, either walk or skate, which is probably only like 3 or 4 miles, but 3 or 4 miles in 90-degree weather with 99% humidity, it was terrible. You know,
man, that strip you had to walk down from was super long.
Yeah, and like I would stop at
and you couldn't ride on your bike either; you had to push it.
Yeah, and like after I would get to the BX, I would drop off my stuff, and then I would run over to the base gym and like lift 2 weights, and then go take a shower, and then go back into work. And then I would get home from work, and there'd be so many people that were partying in there earlier, and just left trash everywhere. And I'm like, great, now I got to clean this up. But I remember like at one point in time, I got so desperate to like be clean that I would go crash people's parties so that I could use their showers and not have to wear sandals when I took a shower with cold water.
Oh man, the ground was so nasty. It was like it had algae on the tiles.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I forgot about a lot.
With no door.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember that because we had to you had to like change out of your boxers right before you went in, then put your boxers back on like as you're coming out and you're wet, and try not to slip and fall because you might get I don't know what kind of diseases you get from falling on there, but and for whatever reason, it seemed like a lot of girls wanted to hang out with us there. Like they thought it was a cool place to be, but it was disgusting.
It was.
Yeah, I mean, I guess
remember Nando?
Yeah, I remember Nando. Didn't he join the army or something like that?
I don't know, but he broke his collarbone. He was just like inside the office recovering for like 6 months. He was just there dead on the floor with no health insurance. Like
I vaguely remember seeing him like, and I didn't know he broke his collar. Maybe I did. I can't remember. It's been so long, I forgot a lot.
Crazy.
Yeah, he was an artist too, wasn't he? Doing a lot of like spray painting and like
yeah, like tagging and stuff. Yeah, he'd do a lot of that.
I wonder what he's up to now.
No idea, but he's pretty much the same. I talked to him a few times. He looks the same.
Yeah, long hair, goatee, and everything.
Shaved head. He's Buzz.
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah. I mean, everybody's got to change their hair sometime.
Yeah.
I'm not doing the whole like Kienpatsu thing anymore. So like.
Good. Thank God.
I mean, I did get a tattoo in memoriam of it. So.
What, Goku?
Goku, and then a Dragon Ball tattooed on my nipple.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was a decision I am still happy that I made. Except I've gotten a lot smaller and then got a lot bigger recently. So. Like when I graduated high school, I was probably 140 pounds, maybe at 6 foot. Mm-hmm. I'm 210-ish now, right? So the Dragon Ball,
like stretched.
It looks like a pizza, like a pepperoni pizza or a bagel or something, or a button, which is what my wife's mom says. She says it looks like a weird button. But
the balls inside the ball. Looks like pepperoni.
Yeah, the stars inside the ball look like pepperoni because they've stretched and warped, so they don't even look like stars anymore.
Jeez.
Oh man, so I'm going to ask you a couple more questions that I wrote down.
Sure.
But like I said, I don't want this to sound like an interview. The way we're flowing with this is really great. But I feel like a lot of people I'm going to be doing this podcast with, it's really just me catching up with old friends, and I'm trying to do podcasts with people that have different backgrounds. So I did one with Jordan yesterday. I've got you today. Yeah. I've got my friend Carlos tomorrow. So people just have different backgrounds for different things. Let's see here. You kind of answered a whole lot of this stuff. Oh, yeah. So here's a good question for you. So like you mentioned earlier, you've been doing photography since high school. I mean, I remember seeing you with the camera in your hands back when girls were taking black and white photos of roses and it was still cool, right?
Yeah.
So what got you started into film photography? Was it your grandfather? Because I know you posted something about your grandfather being a photographer during World War II era. Was it school? Like what got you into that?
I think ultimately it was my discovery of a website called Flickr. And, people that use Flickr back in, I wouldn't say back in the day, but it was around 2008. And a lot of people were posting film photos, and I had no idea about film photos, or I didn't really know the difference between film and digital at the time because the quality was so shit. So I kind of figured that everybody was just shooting film. So I started film after seeing some people's portfolios on there. But at the same time, I did receive. I went to OCSI, Okinawa Christian School, and one of the pastors that worked there, he's the one I actually got the Nikon F3 from. I accidentally but intentionally stole it from him.
You just tactically acquired it, right?
Yes. So he lent it to me because he noticed that I was enjoying photography so much, and my actual first camera was a floppy disk camera that I obtained from a school bazaar, and so I put floppy disks inside a camera, and I'd shoot 2 photos on it because a floppy disk is 2.14 megabytes.
I did not even know they made floppy disk cameras.
Oh, it was a 90s thing, 80s, 90s, and they so you'd walk around with a case of floppy disk like you would rolls of film. So I had like a case of maybe five 5 floppy disks, so I'd be able to take 10 photos. So I'd put a floppy disk in, take 2 photos, spit it out, put the other one in, take 2 more photos. And yeah, that's what I started on. And so this was 2008, and I guess the pastor that I stole the F3 from, he kind of felt bad for me or whatever. So he's like, "Here, I got an F3 if you want to use it." And he didn't really use it all too much, so he lent it to me. And years later, I just kind of held on to it, and he forgot about it. And then somewhere within the 5-year mark, he remembered that he lent it to me, and I was like, oh, I didn't really respond to him. So he was like, okay, Earl probably wants to keep the camera, so he just like let me have it.
Hey, you should send him a copy of your book and be like, hey, you know that camera I borrowed from you? This is what I shot on it.
He probably doesn't want to see all that.
I have a feeling I know what you mean.
Yeah, it's kind of a little over PG-13.
Yeah, and that's the kind of,
NC-17.
I've got to pick up your book. I mean, I've seen a lot of your work online. I mean, I follow you on Instagram and I see everything you post, but I know in that book you've got to have stuff that you haven't let out on the internet. I think at the time that I saw it, I was in between jobs, so I was like, man, I don't have money to throw anywhere, but eventually I'm gonna have to pick that up for sure.
Yeah, so it's free shipping within the U.S., so just pick it up.
All right, man. I'm definitely gonna plug all that at the end for you, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
So speaking of like floppy disk cameras and Flickr and all of these like old mediums and old ways to get photography out there, right? I am never like in this moment, I feel that kids today that are getting into photography have it so much better than we did, and even better than people did in the 80s and 90s when photography was very heavily still film. Photography advances in film and color film, and the change between like the dark room where you had red light and then now film that's actually sensitive to red light. It seems like we had it in a really weird way, even with video, right? Like I remember in my video communications class in high school, we would shoot on little tiny mini cassette tapes. And the only way to get it onto
mini DVs.
Yeah, the only way to get it onto the computer was to put it in this like weird converting thing that would put it from a cassette tape to a DVD. And then you would take your DVD, put it in your computer, rip it off the DVD, and you probably have hours and hours of footage that's shot on these cassette tapes that it's all like you have these weird lines through it and it's all crappy. And everybody was like making this weird transition like when we were younger from film to digital, and the digital sucked. It was just really convenient because you could get it on a lot faster. If you have an SD card, plug in a computer, you've got it there. But the quality was much lower, I think. I mean, still today, I think that a lot of digital stuff is just convenience rather than quality. But I feel like kids today will never understand the frustration that we had where you get a digital camera and it doesn't come out very good, and you see these film cameras that are really complex and hard to use, but nobody uses them anymore, and it's got way better quality. But we also didn't have YouTube, so if you wanted to learn how to shoot film, you had to know somebody that knew how to do it, or screw up a lot and spend a lot of money on film. Oh man,
I wasted a lot of money. Shoot, I don't even know how I learned. I think just kind of fiddled with the camera, and it was conveniently on the A setting, so all I'd have to do is press the button and it would take photos. I don't know, like people now getting into film. I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm old because I'm not. I mean, I am an 80s child technically, but
I mean, we're both 80s, 90s kids, so we feel old technologically speaking, because I feel like technology's jumped so much farther in 10 years than it ever has.
Exactly. I was used to dial-up modems and floppy disk cameras and MD players and cassette tapes even.
Oh yeah.
But people that have digital cameras right now, they really haven't made. I'm not the one to say film's better than digital, because ultimately digital is way better.
Oh yeah, anybody that says film looks better, it may be aesthetically, sure, but the quality, it's hands down digital today, for sure.
Oh, digital, yeah. And you can also edit your digitals to look like film if you took time to edit it.
Yeah.
No problem. But I literally started from film, so that's what I'm used to. And I do have a digital camera and I do use it, but I am lazy.
Yeah.
And I don't want to edit my photos. It takes a lot of time. So that's why I shoot film. And it's, I don't have to deal with a bunch of files because one roll of film, you have 36. And if you're shooting medium format, you have maybe 10 or 12. So I don't like messing with a lot of files. And that's why I stick with it. But, digital is great. Digital's cool. So if you want to shoot digital, cool.
Yeah. I mean, I enjoy film not because I think it's better. I think for me it suits me better for the kind of photography I enjoy. I enjoy taking street photos, and I think street photos almost never look better on digital. I mean, film is just like something that all my childhood photos are taking on film. So for me, it's a nostalgic feeling. And for me, it's a lot of the process too. I've got to slow down when I'm taking a picture. I don't just fire off 1,000 photos and I have to go through, bring all my photos into Lightroom and then sort through 7,000 photos I took for the day. I've got, like you said, 24 to 36 if I'm shooting 35 millimeter. And I'll spend time lining up a shot, decide this looks like shit, and just not take it because I don't want to waste film. And then the whole process of developing too, it's relaxing to me to smell the chemicals and cut everything. And, even the only thing I don't like about film is scanning. I hate scanning because I always scan at really ridiculously high DPIs so that I don't have to keep my negatives, because I don't work in a dark room to actually like print off my photos because I've just not got into that yet. But every other aspect of it for me, it's like relaxing.
Or you have like completely different design cameras. Something recently that I picked up is this camera right here.
Is it a Mamiya or?
It's called a Bronica. It's a Japanese Hasselblad. But the design of the camera is so different compared to digital cameras. It's just kind of, I think the mechanical aspect of it is really appealing. It's like I compare it to a watch. It's just interesting to hold. So like hearing the shutter off of these cameras is really, really nice to hear when you're taking pictures compared to like a digital camera where it's just like pretty simple and silent. It's not all that fun when you're shooting.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think a lot of the reason why I like film too is the actual feeling of the camera, the heavy, like my Nikon F2. I mean, that thing's like a brick. It's like made out of steel and titanium. I mean, not really titanium, but it just feels like super solid. And this
made out of brass actually. So
okay, cool.
Like, once the coating wears off, it's gonna look a lot cooler.
Yeah, get that cool. What do they call it? It starts with the P. I can't think of it. Where you touch copper and bronze all the time, and whatever. Yeah, I like the sound of it. Every time I take a photo, I feel like I took a photo, and it's
like you literally took a photo.
Yeah, like,
not just pressing a button.
Yeah, and I think that with digital, for me, a lot of the times I kind of feel like when I'm taking a picture, I'm just kind of copying things, and it's like this digital representation of what exists. But for whatever reason, with film, it feels like I took a moment, and because you're actually burning light on paper and you're creating a photo that way. For me, it kind of feels like I'm stealing a moment away and like holding on to it for longer than it should be. Whereas digital, I feel like I'm just like kind of like copying it, and it doesn't really feel like that same moment to me personally, which sounds very pretentious and very hipster, but whatever. If I'm a pretentious hipster that shoots 35 millimeter, I guess that's what it is.
I mean, as long as you're enjoying it, whatever, right?
Yeah, for sure. So, talking a little bit more about film before I want to branch off into a different subject so that I'm not boring you too much with your day off talking about film.
Oh, not good.
What's your go-to films? Like if you had to pick a film stock for color and a film stock for black and white on 35 and then on medium format or large format.
I don't know. I'm pretty cheap. So I buy like Kodak Color Plus or Kodak Gold.
Gold 200 all the way.
I'm out there shooting a lot, so I mean the price of Kodak in Japan has skyrocketed like crazy. So you'll buy like a 5-pack of Kodak Portra 400, and it'll cost you like over like 9,000 yen. Like $88. So like,
Is it
why are
worth
you
it?
gonna spend $88 on like 5 rolls of film? I'll shoot 5 rolls of film on like a Sunday afternoon.
Is it worth it to ship from the States, or is it's not worth it to save money that
It's
way?
not worth it.
Man, that's
So
rough.
I'll either
$90 is
yeah,
ridiculous. I mean, Portra
I
I've
mean,
always felt is like overshot and very overrated and very overpriced in my opinion.
if you are trying to like portrait, they go hand in hand. So if you're doing work for clients that are paying you, get the best quality film. If you have the budget, you can spend it. But if I'm just taking photos on the street and they're for my personal project or whatever, I'd shoot a regular film.
Yeah. What about
It's
black
not.
and white? Do you shoot Ilford? Do you shoot Kodak like Tri-X, or what are you shooting?
I shoot Ilford. I buy 100 feet rolls and I roll them myself in my own little canisters to save money.
So bulk loading really saving you money that way?
Yeah, and I also develop myself, so it saves a lot of money. And when you develop yourself, you can kind of create a style. Whether you're messing up the process, that creates a style in itself, or you're, pushing or pulling or doing whatever. But when you develop yourself, it kind of creates a different look than what a development lab is going to give you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I started developing probably like, I think my very first roll of film I ever shot, I sent off to a lab, and I realized it was going to take me 2 weeks to get back. And I was like, fuck this. I'm going to learn how to do it myself. And I've done it ever since then. What do you use to develop black and white? That's the only one that people really seem like they have the specific brand that they stick with all the time.
I mean, there's a lot of different formulas. I used to use Kodak. I started off with D76 powder. Then I moved to Xtol. Then I moved to HC110, which is liquid.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to mix it with water to get a good consistency for developing liquid. And sending liquid developers to Japan is kind of banned because it's flammable, so they can't really send it through air.
Oh, that's too bad.
So I find myself using more powders. So D76, or I will use like the Fujifilm alternative. I'll use the Fujifilm developer for Ilford films or Kodak, whatever. And using different brand developers with different brand films, it kind of gives you a certain look. So my looks changed a little bit since I've lived in the States.
Yeah,
so I'm having to use different developers.
That makes sense. I've used one developer for black and white since I started shooting film, and that is Sprint Systems.
Okay.
And Sprint Systems, I mean, it's liquid, so I don't know if they sell it. I don't know if you're ever going to be able to get it in Japan since it's liquid, like you said. But one bottle of this stuff, it's like a liter bottle, and I think to make a liter's worth of developer, you would use like 100 milliliters out of this liter bottle. So there's a lot of usage in it. I used like their stop bath, their fixer, and their developer. I think it cost me $30 for all three online, and I used it for over a year because the exhaustion on it. Like once I made the mixture, I could probably get like 20 rolls out of it, and I've developed with that chemical, like used the same one for like 2 months straight, and it'd been totally fine. Even when like the bottle's turning like black and gross, it still was totally fine. And nobody knows about Sprint Systems, but they're so
I've never heard of it.
Yeah, they're so inexpensive, and they're so good, and they just last forever. I love it. Especially, I really like liquid too. I'm not a fan of powders because powders to me, it's just in my head. It seems like every time I'm mixing them together, I'm going to inhale it on accident or something. So like I'm always like, you gotta
wear a face mask or a regulator or something.
Yeah, for sure. And with liquids, it's just I know I can be very precise because I can just do a measuring cup and know exactly what I'm doing. And the cool thing about Sprint Systems is you can develop at pretty much any temperature you want. So like they've got a chart where you can develop at like 65, anywhere between 65 degrees and 75 degrees. So it's all room temperature. And you can adjust your times based on how cold or warm the liquid is. So something I've used with every kind of film I've ever shot. But yeah, I always stick with HP5. It's like my go-to black and white film. Kodak Gold
Same.
200, or I've been using Fuji Color 200 a lot because it's $12 for 4 rolls because it's cheap.
That's cheap.
Yeah,
That's super cheap.
And they sell it at like
I wish I still had that.
And they sell it at like random stores like CVS and stuff like that. It's like the last film that's still in like big box stores. But I mean, I like the look of Portra sometimes, and I did the hipster thing of pulling Portra to give it that like white out look, but
kind of soft.
Like real soft, real like
pastel
tones. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But like I thought that was kind of overdone, and I kind of didn't want to copy everybody else's style. So a lot of my styles come from damaged film. So like I'll either damage it on purpose or accidentally. A lot of my developing stuff, I was getting these weird lines in my photos, like right where the holes were. I can't think of what they're called. The advancement holes.
Sprockets.
The sprockets. Yeah. There you go. And it turns out it was just like something wrong with the system I was using. So like the liquids were rushing in at weird intervals. So I've got these weird white lines through some of my photos. It looks kind of cool though. Pretty interesting. Yeah. I've also developed a lot of color film in black and white chemicals as well to kind of see what happens with that. Yeah.
I've never done that.
And it makes sense that it would still work, and it does work just fine. I developed 21-year-old film that had been shot 21 years prior, and it was color. And I only develop really old film like that in black and white because I know I'll get an image. With color liquids, it's really hard for me to try to figure out how long to do it for. And my wife had these rolls of film that were super old, and the only thing I've noticed is it's not as contrasty, but beyond that, like, it's still fantastic. I mean, I don't edit my film, but if I'm shooting something like that, I might bring up the contrast a bit, or get rid of some pictures.
Sometimes you need to. It's like, depending on the liquid, how old it is, it might come out really flat.
But it's kind of cool because in a pinch, when I want to shoot, color chemical developing is just way more expensive, and it doesn't last as long. So if I've got a lot of color film and I'm learning short on black and white, if I'm just doing street photos, sometimes I'll just develop color film in black and white chemistry.
Yeah. Oh, maybe I should do that. I just take it to my local lab and have them develop it for me for like $5. Then I come back and I'll scan it.
Yeah.
Like, drop it off and pick it up. Because they can't do color development in Japan.
You can't do color development?
No, it's because a lot. I mean,
you mean like at home you can't do it, or labs can't do it?
They don't. At home you can't do it. They don't sell the developer because color film, when you develop it, it leaves silver in the developer,
and you got to figure out a way to get rid of it.
When you're dumping that, so like the regular person is probably going to dump it, and you can't trust everybody to take the same safety precautions and take it to a lab to be disposed of. So they don't want a bunch of silver in the water. So they're not going to put out a color developer for the public to use.
That makes sense. I mean, that sucks, and it makes sense.
It sucks.
It makes sense for Japan, I guess.
Yeah, like I mean, I can't guarantee everybody anywhere is safely disposing it.
Yeah, I guarantee nobody here does it at all. I guarantee most people here just put it right down their bathtub.
Yeah, and that's not safe at all. So I just develop black and white. It's fine.
Yeah, I've kind of, majority of my film is black and white. I very rarely shoot color. I learned how to shoot on black and white, and I kind of prefer black and white too because I'm really more interested in the shadows and the light than I am in the color. And I feel like a lot of people that shoot color, when I started shooting color a lot, I was really attracted to colors more than I was to subjects. So I was like, oh, this is really colorful. Take a picture. Turns out it's a shit picture that's really colorful. It didn't help me out at all. So just kind of trying to like understand that just because it's in color doesn't mean it's better. And just because it's in black and white doesn't make it more artistic either.
Depends, because you have different eyes for different styles of photos. Like, you tend to pay attention to light and shadow when you're looking at black and white. I even found myself seeing different color tones, like after shooting color, and then how to shoot black and white. You can see that type of green, that type of black comes from a green tone.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
or like or a red tone.
Yeah, and
You can
that
tell it's red, but it's in black and white.
yeah, and I've noticed that with black and white, especially when I'm like shooting something that's red or yellow, like kind of get an
Mhm.
idea for the tone of the color rather than the actual
Yeah,
like color itself. Um,
yeah,
let's see here. Okay, sorry, I got a message. Just wanted to check it, make sure we're good. Are you good on time, by the way?
yeah. I'm good. I'm
Sweet,
free.
sweet. So yeah, what you said about photography being very objective too. Um, that's a hard thing for me to try to nail down for myself because I feel like I'm very judgmental of other people's photos, and
Mm.
I feel like a lot of people are, especially when you're not in it for a really long time, or maybe if you're in it for too long, you kind of get judgmental and like kind of like pessimistic about like the reasons why somebody took a photo. I feel like a
Yeah.
lot of the times I find myself like I guess more annoyed than anything about some other people's photos, what I shouldn't be because
Mm.
mine aren't perfect at all and it's subjective. Um, because it's a business for me and I'm trying to make money off of it.
Hmm.
So when I see people that are getting clients all the time, and it's almost like I found myself oftentimes like annoyed, like I'm like, how are people paying you for this? Like it's not good. I could take a way better photo, and then I've got to stop and realize, like, well, art is subjective. So what's good to somebody might not be good to somebody else, and maybe my style is not fitting for what they're doing. But I have a hard time
Or
doing that.
they're just they're buddies,
That's true.
and they get hired because they just know each other, and it's easier to hire somebody that you know.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's a lot of the time it's probably that you know easier to hire somebody like that.
Yeah, and the majority of the photography that I get paid for is like shooting female models, and a lot of it's for like
Mhm.
portfolio work or like for something a specific look that they're trying to get into.
Mhm.
And that's majority where I get my money from. And I've noticed in my area in Cincinnati and Dayton, Ohio, which is like they're like the two southernmost cities, southwestern most cities in Ohio.
Mhm.
Majority of the photographers around here are male. Majority of them only take pictures of females, and majority of them only take pictures of young, pretty females. So when I see all these
Yeah,
guys work, it makes me feel bad because I have to like let people know, like, hey, look, I'm not creepy. My wife comes with me to like most of my photo shoots, but I see a lot of
yeah.
these guys taking photos and they get a lot of traction, and I feel like I want to tell them like, hey, the only reason you're getting popular is because you're taking pictures of boobs. Like that's
Yeah,
it's
and
gonna get
and the
attention.
people following you are just people that want that soft core.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there's a lot of models that are tricked by these guys saying like, "Oh, I've got a couple thousand followers on Instagram, and I'll definitely help boost your career." And then like they go do it, and they get, I don't know. I don't know if it's beneficial or not, but it makes me feel uncomfortable.
You gotta look at the end game. Like 50 years from now, you know, are your model pictures are you going to be happy with looking at your model pictures? Are you going to be happy that you actually created work for yourself? And that's what I'm looking at right now. It's like I'm 30 right now, 31, I'm going to be 32. Am I going to enjoy these model photos as my own personal work in the future? Probably not. Definitely not. So I'm finding myself creating more work that I feel attached to, something that I have a connection to, and that speaks as a body of work. So, like, if I showed somebody, they wouldn't be like, "Oh, that's a technically good photo of a male or female." Like, cool, you know, kind of lined up to okay, you have a body of work of, for instance, Okinawa. It's like, okay, I came from there. I have this connection with this island. I want to tell this story. It's definitely more significant when you put it in that perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And
So always look at the future. Or are you going to enjoy this later on?
that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah.
I think some of my photos that I've enjoyed the most taking were street photos or like photos of, I don't know if I would really consider it street, maybe like documentary photos or like
Hmm.
a huge thing that I've been getting into recently, especially with all the
Hmm.
protests going on and everything that's going on like socially in the United States. Um, what I really enjoy is taking a photo that makes people think about what's in it, you know? So like one of my most popular photos is a photo of a Black Panther walking past a white guy during a KKK rally protest. And the Black Panther's
Hmm.
got like an AR-15 and he's got bulletproof vest on. He's got a Glock on his side, and the white guy's like giving him this like angry look as he's walking past, and like he's just like straight looking ahead. And I took that picture, and I didn't think much of it when I took the picture. I was just like, oh, there's like duality here. Black guy with an afro and you know, like militaristic style clothing, and then a white guy who was like just before then kind of like saying some stuff that might not have been super great. And when I took the picture, I put it online. Then all of a sudden everybody wants me to like elaborate on what happened and like, tell me more about this. Tell me more about what's going on. Tell me what happened this. And I was getting ready to, and I stopped and I was like, no, I'm not going to tell you what happened. I'm just going to let the photo exist so you can make up whatever you want about it. And I don't know if that's a good thing or bad thing if you take photos like that. Like, I don't know if I've got a responsibility to let people know, like, hey, this is what happened then, or just let it be. But I can't remember where I was going with that. That was a very weird tangent that I just went on for a second, but that's a kind of thought.
It's completely up to you, and what you do is your thing you created. So, I mean, there's a lot of images that we don't even know who took it, and we just have to like kind of look at it and give our own idea of what the photo's about. So, I mean, it's totally up to you. And taking photos like that, they're timeless. You know, there's been many photos like that made, but you know, we look at them, it's like, okay, this was a part of history, and like 30, 40 years later, it's like, okay, yeah, this was part of the history. So it's like, it doesn't matter when you take it, it's still going to be relevant. But like a portrait, unless it's like an iconic person, it's not going to be really relevant unless you know that person personally and it kind of means something to you.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, majority of the photos that I've taken that I've really fallen in love with have either been a portrait, but it's more like an art portrait that I created every aspect of, you know, to like have a meaning behind it. Like I've got one of somebody dressed up as a nun holding up a newspaper as it's on fire, and it says USA Today, like right underneath the fire. So it was almost like a jab at like stuff that was going on, you know. But especially with like the documentary type photos, like I feel like you're right, like there is a timeless aspect to it. And I think that what was interesting about the photo I took of that Black Panther is they're both wearing tennis shoes from like modern era, you know. So if you look at that photo just like as it is, you think, oh, Black Panther and everything, it could be in the 50s or something. And then when you look closer, it's like, oh, wait, it's an AR-15. So that's kind of recent. And then you see the shoes and you're like, oh, wait, are those Nikes? Like that didn't exist in the 1940s, you know?
See, you should put that up to like one of those old like 60s, 70s photos and like see the differences between that.
Yeah, and not to get too political, but it was very, that was a couple years ago in Dayton, Ohio. They had a KKK rally where they had shut off like a huge portion of the downtown district to let like 4 white dudes in robes like burn across and yell the N-word in a megaphone. And like they spent like $500,000 on security for these guys and like had separated the protesters by like multiple gates, and they brought in like state agents and people from all over the place, had a helicopter floating above the entire time. And a lot of these photos I took of like people up against a fence yelling at the KKK members, right? When I look at those objectively, they look like it came from the 1950s during a protest about civil rights, which is sad that 70 years later, it's almost an exact replication of that too.
Yeah.
And the most sad part about that whole situation is that a few days later, we had really bad storms come through, and I believe 2 F3 tornadoes and 1 F4 tornado destroyed a lot of small neighborhoods and a lot of like parts of like small cities. And there was a lot of money that could have gone to relief effort for that, but instead it was wasted. Oh, I think it was like $650,000 they spent to allow these people to say this.
They spent too much on that.
Yeah, and then like a couple days later, tornadoes come through, and a lot of people don't have. I think there was like power outages for weeks where people just had no food, no water. So it was. To me, I'm really happy that I went and took those photos because I remember all these things that happened like socially, and all these things that happened like historically, like right at that time. So it's something I might want to get into more, but it's also something I'm not really too sure about because I don't want to be a political photographer. I just want to take pictures of stuff that exists. And in today's world, especially during the protests that are existing in the U.S. today, it's really hard to not be politically motivated one way or another.
I mean, I think you can't really separate politics and the U.S. It's always going to be like that. You know, it's in our blood. So it's always going to have that separation between different races, different religions, different, you know, ideologies, whatever. That's just how it's going to be and how it is.
And that's something that was very different growing up in Japan and coming back to the US, because who's the prime minister of Japan right now?
Say,
Exactly. This is what I mean. Japanese people
I just
don't
changed.
care.
It's like aso or whatever.
Yeah.
Asshole.
So like no one in Japan really cares about politics that much, except for politicians in like very specific circumstances. I mean, not to say that Americans know who their representative is. I mean, that's not, nobody really knows either. But when we grew up in Japan, politics did not exist. When Obama became president,
People don't care about politics in Japan.
yeah, they don't care at all. So coming back to the
Only
U.S.
old people.
Yeah, and seeing it, well, and also in Japan, it's homogenous, and there's two religions, and nobody's blowing themselves up or killing anybody over their religion either.
Yeah.
Or not anymore, at least. So it's like there's very little to argue about in Japan because everybody's pretty much on the same page, besides social issues like gay marriage and things like that people are fighting for in Japan, or were. I think it was just
actually passed that recently.
Yeah, it was pretty recent. Yeah. Besides some issues like that, Japan's pretty much on the same page, and everybody's pretty much the same. Which is why I hate when people in America bring up Japan as like a reason to push a specific idea that they have about politics, because I'm like, have you been to Japan before? And they say no. I'm like, good, because you would be an idiot if you went to Japan and thought that everything that they do there works everywhere else, because it's homogenous and they're in an island where everything's blocked off. In America, we've got every religion, every race, everything you could possibly think of, and you have to run it differently because of that. And
I don't think there's any real way you can run the country.
Yes.
Whether you have a certain type of president in office, somebody's going to hate it. But it always goes back and forth. If Biden gets elected this year, there's going to be a Republican president next year, whatever. It's always back and forth.
Yeah, that's what makes me laugh about United States politics. Like everybody always says that the two-party system is broken, right? Almost everybody on every side. Yeah, two-party system's terrible, especially when their person's not in office, right? But what they never do is they never vote third party. They always only vote one or two. And then they're like, why is there only two parties? Like, well, you keep voting one or two. You never vote for the other guys. So.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, you could do that, but, majority of the people are just going to vote what they're used to, what their forefathers voted for. They're just going to go with it.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think America's great. I mean, I've got a tattoo that says 1776 on my arm, and it's not because I believe everything that we've done ever is perfect. I know that we've done a lot of terrible stuff, and I know we're going to do terrible stuff next Monday, but like, I love the idea of America, at least, where you can have people that are different races, religions, sexual orientations, different backgrounds, all come together and all be American, which I think is really cool. But it's definitely,
as a place, it's still good, even though it's kind of corrupt in a sense.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people who watch the news too closely think that everything's a shit show and everything's so terrible. And I don't think that at all. I think it's so much better now.
Well, that's just the surface.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially because there seems to be like this huge clash between left and right, especially right now, right? But like in my neighborhood, there's a house just right behind us. That one house has Trump flags, the other house has Biden flags, and they're like 20 feet from each other, right? I was on a walk the other day talking to a friend of mine on the phone, and I saw both of them come home at the same time. They just like waved to each other and like went in their house. Nobody firebombed each other. They didn't shoot each other. It was totally fine.
Yeah. I mean, the small details like that, everybody's like really chill. You gotta be able to live with each other at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. And people are people. Everybody sucks and everybody's cool at the same time. So I think once you realize that nobody's going to be perfect at all, it's kind of a lot easier to deal with. Let's see here. To get off of politics, one more question for you about photography, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Who is your favorite photographer? If you had to pick one photographer whose work that really inspires you or whose work that you really like to look at, even if you don't shoot like them, or just if you can't pick just one, maybe just a couple that you really enjoy.
I'm looking at my little library right now. Let's see. I think my favorite would be Joel Meyerwitz. One of my favorite. He's kind of a documentary photographer based out of New York. I also really enjoy Daido Moriyama and Shomei Tomatsu, Japanese photographer. I do have a lot of influences, but I wouldn't say just one because I do enjoy a lot of people's work. But then again, I don't pay attention to their work so closely that I'm like copying it so much.
Yeah,
because I can never be on their level. Like, never. Even though I try my best to copy somebody. It's not going to look like it. Because one, the era that it was taken in, camera that they were using, the different film, the split moment that they took that photo, it's never going to be the same. So, I can always try my best to be influenced, but never like directly copy them.
Yeah, and that's probably a good thing too. I follow a lot of photographers on one Instagram, but I found myself like looking at that less and less and less, and I'm trying to get inspired by things outside of photography, so I'm not trying to recreate somebody else's photo on accident. I mean, there was a time I took a photo, and when I put it up, somebody was like, "Oh, this is just like a photo I took," and then I went and saw their photo, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, that's what was in my head when I took this photo," and I didn't even realize it. So I've been pulling a lot from like music, old paintings, a lot too, and old cinema.
Movies, and I don't know. Like I've started gardening, so a lot of inspiration comes from that. I don't know why,
like
but
bonsai?
just no. I'm growing tomatoes out on my balcony right now.
I heard tomatoes.
Doing something completely opposite of like photography, you kind of get inspired somehow. I don't know. Keeping your mind off photography is really good, and keeping you healthy minded, because if you're always thinking about it, if you're always on the grind, you're never going to create different work. You're always going to produce the same type of image, so you got to breathe a little bit.
Yeah, if you're always looking for the shot too, like you're missing all these life moments that you could have not spent behind a camera.
Yeah, go hiking or do something. I don't know. Take up baking in the Corona life we live in.
Which is why I've got to like taking up video podcasts. I mean, I did one in person with a pastor, which is the very first one I ever did, and I asked him about tattoos and theology and like if Jews go to heaven. I asked him like all these different questions that I felt like a lot of people had, and they just never had the opportunity to ask somebody, or if they did, they didn't get a cool answer, And then I realized I could do this over the internet, and I thought, man, I know a lot of people who have interesting stories to tell or have hobbies that coincide with mine, so I might as well do this over the internet. So I spent $100 on a microphone and been doing this for a while, and I've noticed that my photography's kind of changed a little bit since then too. I'm not thinking about it all the time. I'm not thinking about like, oh, I should do this differently when I develop, or I should change this setting or do this. I'm kind of just getting a different idea of it. So I think you're right. I think a lot of photography is not taking so many photos. At the beginning, take as many photos as you can and learn. And then as you start to get better at it, learn to leave the camera at home when you go on a hike sometimes.
I mean, don't take it too seriously or you're going to burn yourself out. Just have fun with it.
Yeah, if it turns into a job,
that's why
I
don't like to do it as work. I like to do it because I enjoy it.
Good point.
I'm not trying to be. I'm trying to be professional on my own time. I'm not trying to burn myself out by shooting for work.
Makes sense. I mean, I did marketing for this Japanese company I worked for, and I thought that like doing video and doing like marketing and photography stuff is exactly what I wanted to do, because marketing aligns with social media marketing, which is perfect for photography and videography. And I hated it. Every day I went in, it was just like, when you're forced to be creative and you have a reason to be creative all the time and you constantly have to come up with something, it seems like the work I was doing just meant less and less and less and less.
Yeah.
And to the point that it was just like pulling teeth, and I didn't even want to look at a camera ever again. So I figured that, for photography, I'll do it for money, but I have to do it for myself first, for sure.
as long as you're keeping your own style and keeping true to like what you like, it's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, man, I've run out of questions to ask you, and I don't want to keep you for too long. I also have to
No,
pee
you're good.
because I've been holding it. For, I don't know how
Me
long
too.
we've been on this
I've
call.
had 3 cups of coffee in this last hour. So,
well, it was a pleasure talking with you, my man. Do you have anything? Do you want to plug something in here? You want to tell people your website, what you're up to, if you've got anything coming out recently, how they can get in contact with you if they want to do photos with you sometime.
I mean, my website is just my website and it's a portfolio, but it's theearlington.com.
And that is EARLINGTON.
2 E's.
2 E's, the Earlington.
Yeah.
Okay.
.com, and probably the better place to reach me at is Instagram at Earl Standerford on Instagram.
Awesome. I'll link that in the YouTube description, so I have your website and your Instagram in there as well. But this is also going on Spotify, so anybody who's listening or Apple Podcasts or whatever, go check out Earl's stuff. He's got some really cool work. I think it's really interesting, and it's definitely a breath of fresh air outside of like some photographers that see a lot, because yours looks a lot different.
Appreciate that, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we should do this again sometime. We'll talk about something besides photography for 5 hours, so you don't get too burnt out on it.
No. I'm working on a project soon, so maybe we can brush up on that.
Absolutely. That'd be down to do that, dude. All right, man. Have a good rest of your day. Since it is morning time there, I'm about to use the bathroom and then go to bed soon.
Okay. Well, nice talking to you, man.
Yeah, you too. Let's go. Bye-bye.
Let's go. See ya.
See ya.